In a small town nestled on the edge of the Arizona desert, life moved at a slow and steady pace. The townspeople knew each other by name, and most of them had been living in the area for generations. The sun beat down relentlessly during the summer, and the land was harsh, but the people had learned how to survive. Among them lived Rosa, a widow who had earned the respect of the entire town. She was a strong woman, both in body and spirit, who had taken on the responsibility of raising her twin children, Juan and Maria, all by herself. Rosa's husband had passed away many years ago in a tragic accident, leaving her with nothing but their small ranch and her two young children. The loss had been devastating, but Rosa had no time for grief. She had to be strong for her children. Each day she worked tirelessly to keep the ranch running, feeding the animals, tending to the crops, and maintaining their modest home. The work was never-ending, and it was not easy, but Rosa loved the land, and it was all she had left of her husband. She believed in the importance of family, of teaching her children to respect their roots and to live with dignity. No matter the challenges life threw at them, her children, Juan and Maria, were the light of her life. They were full of energy, always running around, playing together, and keeping her on her toes. Juan was the more adventurous of the two, often exploring the land surrounding their ranch, while Maria was thoughtful and cautious, always looking out for her brother. Together they were inseparable, and Rosa couldn't help but feel pride in how strong they had become, even at such a young age. Despite the difficult circumstances, Rosa managed to maintain a sense of peace on the ranch. The days followed a simple routine, and Rosa grew comfortable in her solitary life. She had long since closed off her heart to the possibility of romance. It had been too painful, and the responsibilities of being a single mother were enough. But like many people in the small town, she couldn't ignore the whispers of others who believed it was time for her to find love again. Rosa had heard those whispers, of course, but she ignored them. She didn't need anyone else. She had her children and her work, and that was enough. However, everything changed one warm afternoon when a stranger arrived in town. Henry was a tall, well-dressed man who had recently returned from serving in the military. He had traveled across the country, seeking new opportunities, and had decided to settle in the quiet town of Rosa's ranch. He had heard about the town's rugged beauty and the simple life its people led, and he thought it might be the perfect place for a fresh start. When Henry first arrived, he didn't expect much. He was just looking for peace and quiet, a place where he could work and heal from the emotional toll of his years in the service. But as soon as he laid eyes on Rosa, something about her struck him. It wasn't just her physical appearance, though she was indeed a large woman, but the way she carried herself. Rosa had a quiet strength about her that was both beautiful and intimidating. It wasn't the kind of beauty that you saw in magazines or in movies, but it was powerful, real and raw. Henry couldn't help but be drawn to her. Rosa didn't notice Henry at first. She had her hands full with the ranch, and she wasn't interested in meeting anyone new. But Henry began to visit the town's general store frequently, and over time he and Rosa started exchanging polite greetings. Henry admired her from a distance, noticing how hard she worked and how deeply she cared for her children. One day, as he was purchasing supplies at the store, he struck up a conversation with Rosa. At first, their talks were short, about the weather, the crops, or the town, but as days passed, their conversations grew longer. Rosa began to see that Henry wasn't like other men she had known. He wasn't there to flirt or make small talk. He seemed genuinely interested in her life, her ranch, and her family. As their conversations continued, Henry learned more about Rosa's story. She shared memories of her late husband, the struggles she had faced after his death, and the difficult choices she had made to keep the ranch running. She spoke with pride about her children, and her love for them was evident in everything she said. Henry found himself listening to her with great attention, intrigued by the depth of her character. He could see that she had faced hardships, yet she remained kind and generous, always willing to help others in the town when they needed it. Rosa, in turn, was starting to notice Henry in a different light. At first she had seen him as just another newcomer, someone passing through the town, but as their talks became more personal, she saw that he was different from the others. He wasn't trying to impress her with grand gestures or romantic words. Instead, he was patient and understanding, genuinely interested in her and her life. Rosa felt an unfamiliar flutter in her heart, but she quickly pushed it aside. She had no time for such things. Her children needed her and the ranch needed her, and that was where her focus had to remain. Still, there was something comforting about Henry's presence. Every time he came to town, Rosa found herself looking forward to their brief encounters. She had to admit that there was something special about him, something that made her feel both at ease and curious. But she also felt a deep sense of caution. After all, she had been hurt before. Could she really open her heart to someone again? One afternoon, as Rosa was walking through the town square, she spotted Henry sitting on a bench, looking out over the desert landscape. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the scene. Rosa hesitated for a moment, then walked over to him, sitting beside him on the bench. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the quiet of the desert surrounding them. Finally, Henry spoke. "You've got a beautiful place here," he said, his voice soft but sincere. Rosa smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "It's a hard place. Not much grows here, but it's home. My family made it work." Henry nodded, understanding. "I can see that. You've made something out of nothing, and that's not easy. I respect that." Rosa was surprised by his words. Most people didn't see her that way. They saw the widow, the woman who had to work hard every day just to keep going. But Henry saw more than that. He saw her strength, her determination, and her love for her children. It made her wonder if she had been wrong to shut herself off from the possibility of love. As the evening wore on, they continued talking, slowly building a connection that neither of them expected. The conversation drifted from topics of family to dreams of the future, and for the first time in a long while, Rosa felt a spark of hope. Perhaps there was more to life than the endless work on the ranch, more than the weight of the past. Little did Rosa know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. As the days passed, the town of Arizona remained quiet and peaceful. But for Rosa, something had begun to change. It wasn't something she had planned or expected, but there was no denying that a shift had occurred in her life. Henry, the newcomer, was no longer just a face in the crowd. He had slowly become someone she found herself thinking about more often, even when he wasn't around. The conversations they shared, simple at first, had turned into something deeper. Each time Henry came to the town square or the general store, Rosa found herself looking forward to their chats. It wasn't just Henry's kindness that intrigued her, but the way he made her feel. For so long, Rosa had carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, raising 2 children on her own, managing the ranch, and trying to keep everything running smoothly, left little room for her own needs or desires. But with Henry, she felt something different, a quiet connection that made her feel seen. In a world where she was often just the widow, the mother, or the hard-working woman, Henry saw her as Rosa, not just a role, but a person with her own story, her own life. She tried to shake off these feelings. After all, what did she have to offer someone like him? Henry was well-traveled, worldly, and had been part of a bigger world outside the small town. He had spent years in the military and had seen things most people never could imagine. Rosa, on the other hand, had never left the town, had never seen the world beyond the desert. She was just a ranchwoman with 2 children. What could he possibly want with her? But there was something in his eyes when he looked at her, a warmth and sincerity that was hard to ignore. And that made her uneasy. She didn't want to get her hopes up, didn't want to allow herself to dream about something she knew could never be. Yet every time Henry smiled at her or asked about her day, a part of her felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. Henry, for his part, was just as confused. At first, he hadn't come to Arizona expecting anything other than a quiet place to rest. But Rosa was different from anyone he had ever met. She was strong, hard-working, and deeply loyal to her children and her community. But what stood out most was how fiercely independent she was. Unlike many women he had known, Rosa didn't seem to need him. She was self-sufficient and unafraid of the challenges life threw her way. That impressed Henry. It made him want to get to know her more. But Henry wasn't the type to rush into things. He had seen enough of life to understand that relationships weren't something that could be forced. He needed time to understand who Rosa truly was, beyond the surface. He also had to be careful. He had noticed how protective she was of her children. Juan and Maria, though young, were already sharp and perceptive. They would not welcome just anyone into their lives. So, Henry decided to take his time, to be patient, and to let their friendship grow naturally. It didn't take long for him to realize how much he enjoyed spending time with Rosa. Sometimes they would meet at the town's general store, or they would run into each other when he was out and about, running errands. Their conversations always felt effortless, as though they had known each other much longer than they actually had. They spoke about everything: the weather, the crops, how life was in the town, and even their pasts. Rosa was a good listener, but she also opened up to him in ways she hadn't expected. She would share stories about her late husband and how difficult it had been to raise the twins on her own. She spoke of the joy and challenges of motherhood, and Henry would listen intently, understanding the depth of her feelings without saying much in return. Henry, in turn, would share some of his own life stories. He told her about his time in the military, about the places he had visited, and about the people he had met. At first, Rosa had been hesitant to ask too many questions about his past, worried it might seem too personal or intrusive. But over time, she grew comfortable asking him about his experiences, and he was always open, always kind, never making her feel like she was prying. It wasn't long before the twins noticed the growing connection between their mother and Henry. Juan, with his boundless energy, was the first to speak up about it. One afternoon, while Rosa was busy tending to the ranch, he found Henry fixing a fence nearby. Juan ran over to him, his small feet kicking up the dust, and stopped right in front of him. "Are you going to marry my mommy?" he asked, his eyes wide with innocent curiosity. Henry looked down at the boy, caught off guard by the question. He chuckled nervously, not knowing how to respond. "Well, Juan," he said with a smile, "I think your mommy and I are just friends right now." Juan nodded as if he understood, but then looked at Henry with the kind of seriousness that only a child could have. "We want you to marry her. We think you'd be good for her," he said with the same honesty that children always had. Henry's heart swelled at the words, though he tried to keep his composure. Later that evening, after the twins had been tucked into bed, Rosa sat quietly on the porch, watching the sunset. Henry joined her, sitting a little distance away but still close enough that they could talk. The air was cool, and the desert sky was painted with deep oranges and reds as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was a peaceful moment, and Rosa found herself feeling a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. "I think your kids like me," Henry said, breaking the silence. His voice was light, but there was an undertone of uncertainty. "Juan, well, he seems to think we should get married." Rosa smiled at his words, though there was a hint of sadness behind her eyes. "Juan speaks his mind," she said. "He doesn't know much about relationships yet, but he has a good heart. And Maria, well, she's more thoughtful, more cautious. She hasn't said anything yet." Henry nodded, understanding. He didn't expect the twins to immediately accept him into their lives, but he appreciated how honest they were. The last thing he wanted was to come into their lives too quickly, or force anything that wasn't natural. But he couldn't deny the growing attraction he felt toward Rosa. It wasn't just her strength or her beauty, but the way she made him feel at home. He hadn't felt that in a long time. Rosa, for her part, was feeling something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. As much as she tried to push it away, as much as she told herself she wasn't ready for this, there was a part of her that longed for the connection that was blossoming between her and Henry. But she was scared. She was scared of letting her guard down, scared of what it would mean for her children, and scared of getting hurt again. For now, they remained friends, but neither of them could ignore the growing bond between them. It was like a slow, steady flame that had started to burn quietly but was beginning to spread. They both knew that something was happening, but neither was willing to rush it. They wanted to see where this would go, one step at a time. And so, with each passing day, their friendship deepened, and the attraction between them became harder to ignore. The quiet moments they shared, the simple conversations, and the growing bond between them made Rosa wonder if, just maybe, there could be something more between them. Something real. Something lasting. but only time would tell. One evening, the golden light of the setting sun bathed the ranch in a soft, warm glow. Rosa had spent most of the day working in the fields, checking on the crops, and making sure everything was in order. The ranch was her life, and though it was a lot of work, it gave her a sense of purpose. Juan and Maria were playing near the house, running around and laughing, their carefree energy filling the air with joy. Rosa smiled as she watched them, thankful for the happiness they brought into her life. As the sun dipped lower, Henry walked over to the ranch just as he had done many times before. He had become a regular presence in their lives, and Rosa found herself looking forward to his visits. Sometimes they would work together on the ranch. Other times they would just sit and talk. Over the past few weeks they had grown closer, and Rosa had started to feel a deep connection to him. It wasn't just his kindness, though that was certainly a big part of it. It was the way he made her feel. With Henry, she felt like she could relax and let her guard down. He didn't judge her or see her as just a widow or a mother struggling to make ends meet. He saw her for who she truly was, strong, capable, and deserving of happiness. But despite all this, Rosa still wasn't sure what to make of her feelings. She had been hurt in the past, and the thought of opening her heart to someone else again frightened her. It wasn't just her own feelings she had to consider either. Her children, Juan and Maria, were everything to her. She had to protect them, and she didn't want to bring anyone into their lives who might hurt them. The idea of a new relationship, of potentially introducing Henry as more than just a friend, felt like a big step, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it yet. That evening, as Rosa sat on the porch after finishing her chores, she saw Juan and Maria running toward her. They were laughing, but there was a serious expression on Juan's face, one that seemed out of place for the usually carefree boy. Maria was walking beside him, her head tilted slightly to the side as if she were deep in thought. "Mama," Juan called out, his voice full of excitement. "We need to talk to you." Rosa looked at them with a smile, wondering what they were up to this time. Juan and Maria were always full of energy and had a way of turning even the simplest moments into an adventure. But today, something about their expressions made Rosa pause. There was a certain seriousness in the way they were walking, a hint that something important was on their minds. "What is it, Juan? What's going on?" Rosa asked, her tone soft but curious. Juan and Maria stopped in front of her, and for a moment they just looked at each other as if deciding who would speak first. It was Maria who finally spoke, her voice calm but steady. "Mama, we want to talk about Henry," she said, looking directly at her mother with wide, thoughtful eyes. "We think he's a good man." Rosa's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Henry's name. She had no idea what they were about to say, but she could already feel the weight of their words settling in her chest. Juan, unable to contain his excitement, quickly added, "We like him a lot, Mama, and we want him to be with you." Rosa blinked, surprised by the sudden boldness of her children. They had never been shy about expressing their thoughts, but this was something different. They weren't asking about a toy or a new game. This was something much more serious. "You want Henry to be with me?" Rosa repeated slowly, trying to make sense of what they were saying. She had never thought her children would have an opinion on her relationship with Henry, or on the idea of dating again at all. They were still so young, so innocent. How could they possibly understand what it meant to have someone new in their lives? Juan nodded vigorously. "Yes, Mama. You and Henry should get married. You're happy when he's here, and we like him. He's nice to us, and he helps you with the ranch." He paused, looking at Rosa with a level of sincerity that made her heart ache. "We want you to be happy, Mama." Maria stepped forward and placed a hand on her mother's knee, her small face serious yet full of warmth. "You deserve someone who makes you smile," she said softly. "Henry makes you smile, and we like him. We think he'd be good for you. We want him to be with us, to be a family." Rosa sat back, her mind spinning. She had never expected this. Her children, with their simple, honest hearts, had just told her what they thought was best for her. And the truth was, they were right. Henry made her smile. He made her feel things she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. He was kind, patient and thoughtful, not only toward her but toward her children as well. But it was one thing for her children to like Henry, and it was another thing entirely to consider the idea of taking their relationship further. Could she really open her heart to someone again? Could she allow him to become a permanent part of their lives? For a moment, Rosa said nothing. She looked at her children, their faces full of hope, and realized just how much they had grown in the time since their father's death. Juan and Maria were wise beyond their years, understanding more about love and family than many adults ever did. They could see the good in Henry and they wanted her to be happy. They wanted a family and they believed Henry could be a part of it. Rosa's heart swelled with emotion as she thought about all the love she had for her children. They were her world, and she would do anything to make sure they were happy and safe. And yet, she couldn't ignore the part of her that felt a flutter of hope at the thought of sharing her life with someone like Henry. Perhaps it was time to take a chance. Perhaps it was time to believe that she could have a future beyond the walls of her ranch. Maybe she could have a family again, a family that included Henry and the children she loved so much. "Thank you," Rosa said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. She looked at Juan and Maria, her heart full of love for them. "Thank you for thinking about me. I promise I'll think about everything you said." Juan's face lit up and he jumped into her lap, wrapping his arms around her neck. "Does that mean you'll marry Henry?" he asked eagerly. Rosa chuckled, the weight of the conversation lightened by his innocent enthusiasm. "I don't know yet, Juan," she said gently, "but we'll see. I promise we'll talk about it more." Maria smiled softly, her eyes full of understanding. "Just remember, Mama," she said, "you deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who makes you smile." Rosa kissed both of them on the forehead, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for their love and wisdom. As they ran off to play, she sat there for a moment longer, lost in thought. Her children's words had stirred something inside her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: hope. Perhaps it was time to stop being afraid of the future and to take a chance on love, not just for her sake, but for the sake of the family she wanted to build with Henry. But for now, she wasn't ready to make any promises. She needed time to think, time to understand what was in her heart. And yet as the sun sank lower, casting a golden light over the desert, Rosa couldn't help but wonder if her children had already given her the answer she needed. Rosa lay awake that night, staring up at the ceiling of her modest bedroom. The house was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the wind blowing outside. The day had been long, and her body ached from the hard work, but it wasn't the physical exhaustion that kept her awake. No, it was the thoughts swirling in her mind, thoughts she couldn't seem to quiet. Her children's words echoed in her head. "We want you to be happy, Mama." Juan and Maria, with their innocence and honesty, had laid bare what was in her heart, even though she hadn't fully admitted it to herself. They wanted her to be happy, and they saw in Henry the possibility of that happiness. But could she really let someone else into their lives? Could she trust Henry not just with her heart, but with the hearts of her children? Rosa had been on her own for so long. She had learned to rely on herself, to be both mother and father to her children, to handle everything the ranch needed without help. She had never once thought about having someone else in her life. After her husband's death, she'd closed that chapter of her life, convinced that her love for her children and her work on the ranch would be enough. And for many years it had been. But now, with Henry's presence in her life, everything was different. Her heart was torn between the fear of the unknown and the longing for something more. She turned over, trying to find a comfortable position, but it was no use. The truth was, she was afraid of loving again, afraid of letting someone into her life who might not stay. She had already been through so much loss. Losing her husband had been the hardest thing she'd ever experienced, and the thought of putting herself in a position where she could get hurt again felt unbearable. She didn't want to be vulnerable, especially not when her children's well-being depended on her strength. But the way Henry looked at her, the way he spoke to her, made her wonder if she could ever truly be happy without taking a risk. Rosa sighed and sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. She needed to make a decision, but it was hard to know what the right one was. Should she continue on her own as she always had? and keep things safe for her children? Or should she take a chance on Henry, a man who had shown kindness, patience, and understanding toward her? A man who made her laugh, who made her feel like she could be herself again. But then there was the fear of how her children would feel. Yes, they had said they liked Henry, but was that enough? What if things didn't work out? What if Henry wasn't the right person for her? She didn't want to put her children through another heartbreak. They had already been through so much in their young lives, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to risk their happiness for her own. The next morning, as Rosa went about her daily tasks, she couldn't shake the heaviness in her chest. She tried to focus on the ranch work, making sure the animals were fed, checking the crops, and cleaning up around the house. But her thoughts kept drifting back to Henry. She found herself wondering what he was doing, whether he was thinking about her too. But even more than that, she wondered what he truly wanted. Was he just looking for a distraction from his past, or did he truly see a future with her? She had to be careful. She had to be sure. Henry had been coming by the ranch regularly, offering to help with small tasks or just stopping by to talk. He never pressured her, never pushed for anything beyond their friendship, but the connection between them was undeniable. There were moments when she felt so comfortable with him, when the walls around her heart would crumble just a little, and she would imagine a different future. A future where she and Henry could be together, a family with the children she loved so much. But then the doubt would creep in. Was this just a fleeting feeling? Could she truly trust it? One afternoon, Henry came by to check on the ranch. He had been working in town and had stopped by on his way back to his cabin. As always, he had a smile on his face, and he greeted Rosa warmly. The conversation started off light about the weather, the crops, and the work that needed to be done. But as they continued talking, Henry's expression grew more serious. "Rosa," he said, his voice softer than usual, "I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I can't keep it to myself any longer." Rosa's heart skipped a beat. What was this? Was he about to tell her something important? "I've come to care about you," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "Not just as a friend, but as someone who wants more. I want to be a part of your life if you'll let me. I know I'm not from here, and I know it's not easy for you, but I want to try. I want to build something with you, something real." Rosa felt a rush of emotions flood her heart. She had known this moment would come sooner or later, but hearing it from Henry's lips made everything feel so real. She had spent so much time keeping him at arm's length, telling herself that she wasn't ready, that it wasn't the right time. But now, as she stood there listening to him, a part of her wanted to say yes. A part of her wanted to leap into this new chapter of her life with him. But another part of her, the part that had been protecting her heart for so long, was afraid. She couldn't just throw caution to the wind. She had children to think about, a future to consider. Could she really trust him? Could she trust herself? "I care about you too, Henry," she said finally, her voice quiet, her eyes searching his. "But I need time. I need to think about all of this. It's not just me, it's my children too. I don't want to make any decisions I'm not ready for." Henry nodded, his expression gentle. "I understand, Rosa. I'm not asking for you to make any promises today. I just wanted you to know how I feel. I'll give you all the time you need." The weight on Rosa's heart didn't immediately lift, but there was something comforting in his words. He wasn't rushing her, wasn't pushing her to make a decision before she was ready. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of relief. She didn't have to have all the answers right now. She could take her time, think things through, and make the choice that felt right for her and for her children. As Henry left the ranch that day, Rosa stood in the doorway, watching him walk away. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the land, and she could hear the soft rustling of the leaves in the wind. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream of a future that wasn't just about survival. A future where love, hope, and family could take root once again. But even as she let herself dream, she knew the road ahead would be challenging. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she was willing to take it one step at a time, with Henry by her side if he was still there when the time came. The weeks that followed Henry's heartfelt confession were a blur of emotions for Rosa. Each day seemed to drag on as she tried to work through the storm of thoughts in her mind. The weight of the decision she had to make pressed heavily on her heart. The connection with Henry was undeniable. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, in the way he cared for her children, and in the way he had been patient with her, always giving her the time she needed, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give. But it was that very patience that made Rosa's heart ache. She knew Henry wasn't going to wait forever. He had already given her the space to think, to decide what she truly wanted. But what if she couldn't bring herself to make that choice? What if she held back too long and in the end pushed him away? The thought terrified her. She didn't want to lose him. But could she really let him into their lives, into her life after all these years of being alone? Every day when Henry came by to check on the ranch or when they spoke in the town square, it felt like the distance between them was shrinking. He was becoming more than just a friend, more than just someone who helped her with the work on the ranch. Henry was becoming a part of her life, and she couldn't deny it any longer. But the question still lingered. Was she ready to take the next step? Could she really open her heart to him and trust that he wouldn't leave when things got hard? After all, the ranch was a difficult life. It required a lot of work and a lot of patience, and she didn't want Henry to feel overwhelmed or trapped by it all. One evening, as the sun began to set over the desert horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Rosa sat on the porch, her feet resting on the wooden steps. She gazed out across the land, watching as the shadows grew longer and the air cooled. Juan and Maria were inside playing with their toys, while Henry had promised to help her with the last of the fence repairs. He had been a constant presence in her life, and she appreciated the way he stepped in whenever she needed help. He had never asked for anything in return, other than her company, and sometimes when they sat together, she realized that was enough for him. She heard Henry's footsteps behind her and looked over her shoulder to see him approaching, his familiar smile lighting up his face as always. Despite all the uncertainty in her mind, Rosa couldn't help but feel a sense of peace when she was with him. The worries that had plagued her over the past few weeks seemed to fade in his presence. "Long day?" he asked gently as he leaned against the porch railing beside her. Rosa nodded, trying to smile. "Just the usual," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of exhaustion. "I've been thinking about a lot of things lately." Henry looked at her with concern, his brow furrowing slightly. "Anything you want to talk about?" For a moment, Rosa was silent. She had been holding everything inside for so long. Her feelings for Henry, her fears about the future, her hopes for her children, everything seemed so tangled up. But in that moment, she realized she couldn't keep pretending she had all the answers. She had to be honest with him, just as he had been with her. "I've been thinking about us," she said slowly, her voice soft but steady, "about whether I'm ready to open my heart to someone again, and about what that would mean for my children. I don't want to make any decisions without thinking it through carefully. I don't want to hurt anyone, especially not my kids." Henry listened attentively, nodding as she spoke. He knew how much her children meant to her, how much she had sacrificed for them. He also knew that her fear of getting hurt was a real thing, but he wasn't going to let her carry that burden alone. He had made his feelings clear, and now it was time for him to show her that he wasn't going anywhere. "I understand, Rosa," Henry said softly, his voice full of sincerity. "I don't expect you to make a decision right away. I'm not going anywhere. I just want you to know that I'm here and I care about you. If you want to take this step together, I'll be right beside you. And if you need more time, I'll give you all the time you need." Rosa turned to look at him, her heart swelling with emotion. His words were everything she needed to hear. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't asking her to make a decision before she was ready. He was giving her the space to figure things out on her own terms, and that meant more to her than she could put into words. For so long, she had been the one who had to carry everything. The responsibility of raising her children, the weight of running the ranch, and the loneliness of being a widow. But with Henry, for the first time in a long time, she felt like she didn't have to do it all alone. She didn't have to carry all the burdens by herself. He was offering to help her, to be there with her and her children, not just as a friend, but as someone who wanted to be a part of their lives. Rosa took a deep breath and smiled softly at Henry. "I think I'm ready," she said quietly, her voice full of conviction. "I'm ready to take the next step." Henry's eyes brightened and he stepped closer to her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "Are you sure?" Rosa nodded, her heart full of hope. "Yes, I want this. I want to build something real with you. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to take that chance if you are." Henry smiled, a wide, genuine smile that made his eyes sparkle with happiness. "I am. I want this too, Rosa. I've wanted this from the moment I met you. In that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. The doubts, the fears, and the uncertainty that had clouded Rosa's heart for so long began to fade away. It wasn't going to be easy, and she knew that. There would still be challenges ahead. Raising 2 children on a ranch was no small task, and starting a new life with Henry would take time. But Rosa was ready. She was ready to embrace the future, to open her heart to the possibility of love and family again. They sat together on the porch, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. There was no grand declaration or dramatic gesture, just 2 people sitting side by side, knowing that they had made a choice to move forward together. They didn't know what the future would bring, but they were willing to face it as a family. And in that moment, Rosa realized that love wasn't just about grand gestures or promises made. It was about showing up for each other day after day through the highs and the lows. It was about building something real, something lasting, one step at a time. And as she sat there with Henry, she knew that they had already taken that first step. The promise of a future together wasn't just a dream anymore. It was becoming a reality. And for the first time in a long time, Rosa felt a sense of peace. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Henry by her side, and she had her children, the 2 little ones who had always been the center of her world. Together, they were going to create something beautiful.